Well, hello there. I'm Poppa Jon. I'm passionate about comic book movies, but I also love nothing more than to explore and analyze horror films. So if you enjoy heroes and horror like I do, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, hit a like, leave a comment on your thoughts on today's video and today's topic and review, which today I'm going to review Dark Match, which is a movie that stars Chris Jericho. It's directed by Lowell Dean. I've never seen any of Lowell Dean's other work. He apparently does have some other work, though. And this is a Shudder original, a Shudder release that I was kind of looking forward to. I saw the trailer about a month ago, and it caught my attention. It caught my attention mainly because I like 80s horror, obviously, and I just love horror in general. But I also love 80s and 90s wrestling. You know, I'm I'd say I'm more of a casual wrestling fan. I follow it, but I'm not someone that watches Raw and Dynamite every week. But I watch it, I follow it, But I also tend to be someone that watches wrestling more from a historical standpoint. I love going back and watching bad wrestling a few years later rather than watching bad wrestling as it's happening. I'm weird like that when it comes to wrestling. That being said, this is a movie where I went into it to just have a fun time watching a horror movie that takes place in the 80s that's about wrestling. So it just kind of felt like something that's right up my alley for me to have a fun blast with, So just a caveat here, going into this review, just remember that my three favorite documentaries of all time are Eli Roth's History of Horror, the In Search of Darkness trilogy, and Dark Side of the Ring. So this is a movie for me, so I decided to review it and talk about it because no one else is talking about it. So I'm going to. So let's kick the shit to the fan and get this shit started.
It ain't over until one of you's eliminated.
So a small town wrestling company accepts a well-paying gig in a backwoods town only to learn, too late, that the community is run by a mysterious cult leader with devious plans for their matches. I had a blast with this movie. I will sit there, I will tell you, this is not a technical masterpiece. This is not a technical masterwork. This is not going to be one of the best horror films of the year. It probably won't even be one of my favorites of the year. But I had a blast with this movie. I just got to say that. I had a blast with it. There are some things you can certainly just pick apart here and there. Expositions, dumps, if you will, and just certain things that just... Okay, there's a specific character that you're shown and told and everything that he survived this incident, but then he just never pops up again in the movie. It never gets explained what happened to him. He survived. They tell you, they let you know he survived, I guess. But did he? Because you just kind of you just never see him again. So yeah, there's some stuff here that you can pick at if you really want to. But that's not what this movie is there for. This movie is there to have fun. And I think it accomplishes that. Most of the stuff that I loved about this movie is stuff that I know as a wrestling fan. I will say in terms of some of the negative aspect, not really negative because it doesn't affect the movie. It was more something I was looking forward to hopefully happening with this movie when I went into it. I kind of wished there was a little bit more wrestler cameos. Obviously, I'm not expecting Cody Rhodes. I'm not expecting Kenny Omega. I'm not expecting MJF even, because this is a very low budget. You're not going to get the big main event stars in this. But other than Chris Jericho. But is he really a main event star these days? But, I was hoping you'd get maybe a Christopher Daniels or Matt Sydal or John Morrison type. A little bit past their prime. They're not always on TV, so you're not necessarily taking someone away from Dynamite. And, some of them, like John Morrison especially, has some acting experience. I was hoping you get a little bit more of those kinds of people. You don't get any of that. I think there's only one wrestler in this cast outside of Chris Jericho, and that's the guy who plays the silent character Enigma. And even him, he's a wrestler, but he was a local talent on a random episode of Raw and a random episode of AEW Dark Elevation, if you remember that. But that aside, that doesn't ruin the movie. That was just something I was hoping would happen, but it didn't ruin the movie at all. One of the things I got a kick out of was when they actually get to the town and they look at the match card and they look at the stuff, right? There's Inferno match, there's Earth match, there's Water match, there's a Wind match. I said those completely out of order. First, it's Wind match, Water match, Inferno match, Earth match. Or Earth match came before the Inferno match. But I like how they did that, especially like when you think of the fact that an Inferno match is actually a real stipulation in like the WWE with Kane and stuff. And it's like a real thing. Like you have to win. You win by setting your opponent on fire. Now in here, you win by killing your opponent by setting him on fire. Like that's the whole premise of this movie is they get this wrestling gig, but then when they get there and it's too late for them to leave, they realize they're creating snuff films to sell on, like, I guess, not really the dark web because it's the 80s, but on VHS. And, you know, they can't back out. So, like, every match you have to win by killing your opponent. And so, obviously, that's not what the Inferno match is in WWE. But it's still, like, the same concept, set your opponent on fire. It's just, in WWE, they immediately have safeguards in place, whereas here they just let them roast, you know. And then you also get some things I love, like when you get to the the Earth match, which first of all, the Earth match itself, it's like a pile of dirt, but mixed in with the dirt is glass. And I'm just sitting here like, this is a CZW match, this is GCW Tournament of Survival, this is FMW and like original ECW type of shit here, you know. And then the caveat to this is when they actually get there, they like glue, they put like glue on Enigma's hands because he's the one in this match, and then they just shove his hand into a bucket of glass, and it's just, I'm just sitting there like, it's a Taipei death match right here. I think that's the right name. You know, because when Terry Funk did that match at FMW with glass, shards of glass, had to be like glued to it. I think it was FMW, glued to his hands and his his like wristbands and his gloves or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, you got the Taipei death match in this movie. You got an Inferno match. That's one thing I did really enjoy about this movie as a wrestling fan, is the sense that a non-wrestling fan will watch this and just think these are crazy stipulations, right? But when you actually watch these matches compared to real matches from like an FMW, 90s ECW, CZW, stuff like that, these matches, even though people are dying in them, they're very tame. They're very tame compared to some of the matches you watch at some of these deathmatch promotions. And so there's like an element here where it's like this movie is showing very tame stipulation wrestling, and people are dying. And then there's matches in real life that are like almost even worse than the matches in this movie. And so it just really highlights the dangers of wrestling, like the dangers of hardcore deathmatch wrestling to an extent that I kind of loved and appreciated, even though the movie itself isn't necessarily this isn't like some artistic statement of wrestling that this movie's going for. But there's stuff in there that I kind of did appreciate from that element. And just, I had a blast because of stuff like that. So, yeah. Plus, there's an element to this, how they're making them snuff films and then selling them and the V8, like underground wise, they didn't have the dark web in the era that this movie takes place in. But there's an element to that I found kind of Hostel-like, because in Hostel, a lot of times they're live streaming the torture onto the dark web. And so there's an element to that I was like, oh, hey, it's kind of Hostel-ish in that instance, in that little element. The ending of this movie can be divisive. I think it could be divisive. I don't think the movie will be popular enough for it to become this divisive film. But I think for people that do watch it, you'll either hate the ending, or you'll be like me and appreciate and love the ending because of one small little element. So first of all, when you get to the very, very end, there's somewhat of a spoiler, I guess. A creature shows up. And at first, when I saw the creature, I was like, oh God, they're kind of going a little too far with this. I'm not necessarily enjoying this. They're going too far. But then, by the time it cuts to the credits, I loved what they did with it. And I think, and the reason I loved what they did with it was because they titled the movie Dark Match. So, this might spoil what the actual ending cut is, but a dark match is a match that is not televised. It's a match that is not televised. It's not recorded. I mean, sometimes they'll record them for stock footage and stuff, but typically a dark match is a match that is only seen by the people in attendance. It's not televised. It's not shot. So, and I think when you look at the fact that it's entitled a dark match, and every other match in the movie is seen, and then at the end, it cuts. I actually think that's a brilliant cut and a brilliant ending to a movie that is titled Dark Match. So I really actually do love the ending. It made me actually like the movie even more. Like the second it happened, I was like, oh God, Dark Match, yeah. Like, yeah. But weirdly, like, it was I had a weird reaction to that. Because it was like, oh God, they're going too far with this. And then like 2 seconds later, it cuts. I was like, yeah. To be fair, though, I can see people making the argument that they didn't have the budget to do that fight, stuff like that, and so it's kind of a cop-out because they didn't have the budget. But if that's the case, then I still think they did a brilliant job titling it Dark Match, even if it was unintentional, because I think that just adds to sort of the title, the lore of this movie. Now, so all of this being said, as you can tell, I really enjoyed this movie. But like I said, it is not some technical masterpiece. This is not some technical masterwork at all. This is just a fun, kind of schlocky movie. Like, there's stuff you can pick at. Overall, though, if you're a fan of 80s wrestling, 90s wrestling, if you're a fan of 80s horror, just a fan of horror in general, and love to have fun with some comedic elements. So, yeah. If you want horror mixed in with your wrestling, definitely check out Dark Match. I would recommend it, especially if you're a Chris Jericho fan. He doesn't play as massive as a role in terms of screen time as you might think. In terms of the story, he plays a big role, but in terms of screen time, not as much as you might think, but still kind of enjoyed his presence. So I would give this 3.5 out of 5, 7 out of 10. But yeah, 3.5 slices from Poppa Jon.
The Dark Lord shall arise. He's recording these. He's making copies.
This is a snuff film.
If you've seen Dark Match, go ahead and share your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you haven't seen it, are you planning to see it? Do you want to see it? Or do you not have any interest at all? If you've enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. If you hated it, hit the thumbs down. If you enjoy talking heroes and horror, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hit that ding. And yeah. Respect people's opinions because one man's art is another man's shit. And vice versa.